Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It's great to be back here in the studio and I'm recording this video for you finally. That means the content is going to be coming out more often now, but I will touch about the channel content and my medical situation at the end of the video. Right now, let's jump at the situation on the front line and talk about what is happening, but because the situation is pretty rough on certain directions. It's a combination of two major factors. We talked a little bit about this in the last video, but the general factors are that Ukrainian troops are very tired. They're very exhausted, and with the new troops coming in, they're not able to fully adapt to the situation on the front line, and we are seeing quite unfortunate developments on that specific front line. Most notably, we have two directions that we are looking at the most. Direction number one is the direction of Pishene, which is around the Kupyansk direction. Here, Russian forces are trying to advance towards the river. They want to get to this position over here. They have been expanding their, penetration that they did into Ukrainian defense forces a little bit. Ukrainians were able to slow it down, but it's not stopped yet. If Ukrainians are not able to hold this offensive from the Russians, it will mean that the groupings that Ukrainians are having here on the eastern side of the Oskil River that goes right over here will be then separated into two areas, which obviously will compromise and make defenses, for example, of the Kupyansk area to the north more difficult. This is one area that we're definitely looking for. The second area that we're looking for, and thankfully it's been having better news with the Ukrainians delivering some counteroffensive blows to Russia. However, Russians are still advancing, and that is the direction of Toretsk. Toretsk is a major stronghold. Well, like it's a semi-major stronghold, let's put it this way. It's not that this is absolutely critical for Ukrainians, but it's a good position to hold for Ukrainians for sure. I wouldn't call it a city. It's more of like a town. It's been also leveled very heavily by Russians using their aviations, so it's a remains of a town. But in any case, Toretsk is very good position for Ukrainians to hold because it is protecting the southern flank of their Klishivka salient that Ukrainians are holding. This is where the heights are, and Ukrainians holding this heights prevents Russians to actually efficiently strike against a major stronghold, which is Chasiv Yar right over here. So essentially, this is the domino effect that we're looking forward. If Toretsk will fall, then most likely we will see the slow fall of the Klishivka salient, and we will also see a situation worsening for the Chasiv Yar stronghold. Notably, something I must underline is that while the situation is bad on this area and Ukrainians are fighting very hard, the situation is not critical, is controlled by Ukrainians, and Russians are paying dear price for their attacks. And Chasiv Yar, if you remember, the name of Chasiv Yar was actually floated around as something that Vladimir Putin wanted his troops to capture by the 9th of May as a 9th of May present for the Russian armed forces. This did not happen, so despite all of the difficulties that Ukrainians are experiencing on this direction, it is not critical. The situation, however, is pretty bad on the Ocheretina-Avdiivka axis. Here we have a chain of very unfortunate events. Now, it's obviously not the main point of Russian attacks. So we were expecting that Ukrainians will be having less success in this area in general, because while we were expecting that Ukrainians will be redistributing some forces to fend off Kharkiv offensive, And we know that since then, Russians have been deprioritizing Kharkiv offensive, and they were able to send more and more resources towards Avdiivka direction, finally doing what they essentially wanted to do from the get-go, is to concentrate their forces for the attack towards Avdiivka direction. It doesn't mean that the front line is not hot anywhere else, it just means where the main attack is coming. And on this main attack, after the fall of Avdiivka, which was defended quite well, like the fall of Avdiivka, I wouldn't say was something critical. I think the defenses of the village of this settlement and defensive position was quite good. Avdiivka has fallen mostly because of the lack of resources for Ukrainians, because this was during the period where United States, where more specifically MAGA wing of the Republican Party was blocking the aid to Ukraine by the direction of Donald Trump. Since then, there were a couple of defensive lines that there was expectations that Ukrainians will hold. The number one defensive line was specifically Ocheretine, which was right over here, and Progress right over here. These two are relevant because they have like water bodies both on the south and both on the north from this area, and the same kind of in an area of Progress. There is both water bodies on the south and the north, and it's quite difficult to just walk through the water bodies. Even a small river is providing significant difficulties for the attacking force in this war that we have noted. And the issue was that this is the main advanced path for the Russian forces. If you look closely enough, you will see there is kind of something resembling a line that kind of goes along this road right over here. Well, this is actually not a road. This is a railway. And this railway is actually located on a high ground, on a hill. So you can think about this, oh, if this is the railway, then a little bit kind of on the sides of that railway is that hill, and then from there they have kind of the overview and high ground against all of the neighboring areas. So when Ocheretine fell, I said that this was pretty bad because at the time Ocheretine was not really encircled or anything. The enemy was close by at the gates, but they didn't really have any good way to counteract and encircle Ocheretine from both sides. But because of forces of Ukrainians conducting certain mistakes and command of Ukraine not reacting properly, Russian forces were able to break through Ocheretine and essentially collapse the defenses that Ukrainians were having along the water bodies that they had in this area. And Progress has similar situation here, where Progress was not really encircled. Now the situation was difficult. Russians were pushing. I'll kind of scroll back the map a little bit. If you can see, this is when it was captured. But there was no, again, encirclement of Progress, and there was no flank advantage for Russians. They were able to break through the main defensive positions of Ukrainians. And again, here we see with the reports, for example, from the deep state analysis group, the map that which we're using, they're stating that with this advancements is mostly done because of the total superiority of manpower that they have on this direction, and with the aviation bombs and artillery that they're having, the fact that Russian aviation is unchallenged. So they're basically executing an approach where they're sending huge groups of men, like 40-60 platoons, 40-60 men are just being sent forward towards positions. And I've seen some analysts, or not maybe analysts, but like a media reporting on this and stating that Russians are attacking the weak Ukrainian units. For example, there is a new Ukrainian unit that has come in to the front line, and they are still not experienced enough, so they don't know fully how to react when 40, 60 Russian death troops meet a wave attacks are coming towards you. They're not reacting properly enough, and it's then said that Russia is targeting specifically our weakest units. And I think that assessment is kind of bizarre, because what we have seen pretty much a lot of time is that Russia is trying to attack, like something that was described by the Estonian defense ministers, or someone of intelligence ministers of Estonia, I don't remember who specifically, is an amoeba tactic. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to attack at many places of the front line. So wherever they're possible, they're sending these suicide troops, or 40, 60 men, expending incredible resources. No other army is fighting like this. They are losing resources incredibly, and this is something that is not being reported, because when we're reporting, we're stating, oh, this village has been captured by Russians, this position has been captured by Russians, and it builds a narrative that's like, oh my god, Russia is advancing. But it disregards all of these things, the ones that don't succeed as much, where Russia are losing incredible resources, and we're still working in a paradigm that supposedly Russia has this endless resource stockpile that will never end, and Russia can fight this way forever. That is not true. Russian stockpiles are deep, but not eternal. But coming back to the main point is that when their Russians are just seeing that their units are succeeding more, for example, there is 40 guys attacking one position, and then there is like experienced Ukrainian troops, and then these 40 guys don't advance, and then 40 guys attack a position that is a little bit another place, and then they encounter a less experienced Ukrainian troops, and then they're able to capture certain positions, and then Russia says, okay, send in the next 40 guys where we already are advancing. It's not a very, how do you say, smart tactic. It's actually quite simplistic. So when media is building this narrative that Russia is supposedly some kind of a genius level strategy of attacking specifically the Ukrainian units that are posing less resistance, it's completely inaccurate to what we're seeing in reality. Beyond that, there was a very nasty situation that happened around the village of Porokres and Lozovatske because of the Progress defense forces not able to hold a position. Some of the Ukrainian troops actually got into the encirclement, which they were able to break out of. But the shitty part of that is that the order on breaking out the forces for the 31st Brigade never came in from the brigade commander, and it was a decision that was made by the local unit commanders that they were able to escape for their life. It is a problem of Ukrainian military, and we're going to touch more of this, but so far Russia is advancing. We should be expecting Russia to advance. And again, if you are feeling down, a lot of people are sending me mails saying, Georgie, Russia is still advancing. Now they're capturing Progress. Now you're stating in this video that Russia will then capture some other areas as well. Yes, what we need to understand is that Russia is advancing because they're concentrating resources. Ukrainian resources have struggled. If your resources is less than Russian resources, you either trade lives of your people, or you trade in territory, trying to save more lives of the people. Unless you have suddenly a big advantage in weaponry. And as we're going to see today, Ukrainians clearly don't. But the point still stands, is that while Russia is advancing, the way that they're doing it, the expenditure of resources, think about it this way. A lot of perspectives and narratives that are being built as like, oh, if Ukraine is doing bad, therefore Russia is doing well, which is not true. It's completely possible that Russia is doing something. It's doing it relatively poor compared to resource to success ratio. But because Ukraine just have less resources, it appears that Ukraine is doing worse for the time being. But what people keep forgetting is that while Russia may be capturing some of these villages and advancing and so on, the resource expenditure is enormous and they are not endless. I want us all to very clearly state it into ourselves. The narrative that Russia has endless supplies of manpower, the narrative that Russia has endless supply of weapons, the narrative that Russia has endless supplies of armor are false. When we are taking and talking about analysis that Russia has a couple of thousands of infantry fighting vehicles and tanks that were stored on the warehouses over the last year and a half has been disappearing and their stockpiles have been emptying out. What we kind of oftentimes miss the point is that from the warehouses, these vehicles are not just being grinded down and Russia now doesn't have these vehicles. No. These vehicles were taken from the warehouses and they are now on the front line. And now the Ukrainian armed forces, as we're speaking during this very, very difficult 2024, Ukrainian forces are effectively destroying the Russian potential that was on the stockpiles before, and it is on the field now. So when we're saying Russia is advancing, this is done because Russia is grinding down the resources that used to be in a warehouse and now being buried in the Ukrainian fields. The advances to resource ratio, by all analysts that are counting it, by all the military estimates, if you stop looking at the names of the villages that Russia is capturing, the amount of territory and again what Russia is gaining to the resource expenditure is stupid. It's dumb. It's not even close. Russia does not have resources. I'm sorry I'm repeating it this much, but it's crucial, absolutely crucial for us all to be on the same page and understanding and saying that like, oh my God, Ukrainians are losing another village, whatever would I do? No. We're in attrition warfare, and attrition warfare is not defined as awful as it is, as how do you say, awful for the Ukrainians, like towards Ukrainians, to say that their territory is being captured by Russians and so on and being destroyed by Russians. But they are also doing an incredible job at reducing the capacity of the Russian stockpiles. And I want this to be like inscribed in the most notable text ever. And Sersky did an interview with Guardian just recently where he talked about that Russia has been building up a lot of Ukraine. Now, he throws out certain numbers here that if you're going to read this interview, I'm going to link it in the description. For example, he said the 100,000 strong invasion force, where there was numbers at first floated around 250,000 at the start of the war. This is because I think General here is counting only the troops that are fighting, the fighting troops, and not the logistics supply troops, not the support troops, and so on. So, for example, when he's stating 690,000 men, that is, again, the fighting force, not the logistics force, because we know for a fact, no, it's a goal of 690, now it's 520,000. That there is also logistics force, and in total Russian military is over 1 million for sure. So in any case, Sersky here states about the fact that Russians are having an advantage both in manpower, and they're having an advantage in resources, and they're having an advantage in vehicles. And here, for example, he talks about Russia doubling the number of tanks that they're having from 1,700 to 3,500. Again, these are the tanks that, not that Russia produced, it's the tanks that were in the stockpiles and now they're on the front line. And now Ukrainians need to fend off this Russian onslaught. More correctly, not the Russian, but more of a Soviet Union. What Soviet Union was accumulating over many decades to fight the United States and NATO, now Russia is basically using to try to capture some of the territory of their neighbor. Now, if you kind of zoom out and you start thinking, okay, so Russia for over 60 years were gathering all of these thousands of tanks to capture NATO, to capture Europe, to capture United States or whatever, I don't know. And now with all of that force, with all of that resource dedication, with the mobilization of their civil society, they're able to like, move. Then you will understand why I don't see the pessimism. I don't see the despair that a lot of you are writing me in emails or direct messages on Discord or somewhere else. Big news that are making the rounds right now is a situation in Mali where the Wagner forces have been assaulted by some of the African locals, which is great. I mean, it's good news, but to be honest, beyond the headline, this is not a big news for the war. So I don't share the excitement, but I mean, Russians having an L in their external efforts, it works wonders for me. Additionally, talking about the Ukrainian military, something more relevant. Oleg Sentsov, a person that is an absolute legend, like you should Google his name and maybe find a Wikipedia article or some other article, like because this guy is a legend, what he went through and where he are right now, and he is an absolute Chad. He made like a whole interview with BBC. Again, I'm going to link it in the description. And he made a couple of really good points. One was, what's the situation with this with the Ukrainian military? I told you a lot that Ukrainian military really needs change, and there seems to be that some of the change was coming. However, Oleg Sentsov, one of the newer brigades participants of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, right now it's one of the major brigades that is a firefighting brigade. So whenever there's an issue on the front line, the 47th Brigade is being sent to deal with this. He's stating that the army is very archaic. It's a vertically structured and firm structure. It cannot be reformed from within. So he always states that right now in Ukrainian military, nobody wants to report the bad news to top. The situation is difficult, but under control. It has become a meme, right? So we're talking about the situation being difficult, but under control is a bit of a meme. We do not have an after-action review procedure that is analysis of errors after the operation of the platoon, company, battalion level. It is expected that you either complete the task and then you are great, or you do not. But in war, there is not always positive result. You need to understand why the results were negative. So the lack of reflection on mistakes is something that he underscored, but I really want to underline, and this is something that I always do with the analysis and when we're reading personal experiences of separate troops. The guy is a trooper, the guy is a legend for sure, but he's not a military strategist, right? He knows how the war is. We definitely need to listen to his advice, but he doesn't fully see the big picture that oftentimes like how to win this war. He doesn't know the plan of the general staff. And that's important to know. However, it is really worth noting that there are issues with Ukrainian command, and these issues we see now reflected on the situation with the Ocheretina, Progress, Avdiivka direction. Most notably, this also comes back to Zelensky's unwillingness of his decision to mobilize additional troops, despite a lot of the military professionals stating that there needs to be a bigger drive for mobilization, but it was not there. Additionally, he's talking about Syrskyi because a lot of people would say it's like, aha, so Ukrainian military is bad, therefore Syrskyi bad. But in the same interview, I just want to right away shut down all of these rumors. He states that no, Syrskyi is fine. He's a good commander-in-chief, and there is little to no difference for him between Syrskyi and General Zaluzhny. And this just underscores that like he's not a military strategist. If he says like, oh, Syrskyi and Zaluzhny is the same thing, it just underlines that there is no full grasp of that vision that one commander had over the other. It's not because he's dumb, it's not because I am smart. No. I have like nothing on this guy, like this absolute fucking legend. What I'm stating is that we are operating in a lack of information space. We do not know what are the plans of General Zaluzhny and were the plans of General Zaluzhny, and we do not know what is the difference to what the General Syrskyi is proposing and how he's proposing to win the war. Because right now Syrskyi is operating in a full defense environment, and he's trying to exhaust and destroy Russian forces as much as possible. and he's doing a pretty good job. A lot of the analysts are stating that he is doing a great job. He says that the system has accumulated problems. There are exhaustion. The troops are exhausted. The lack of ammunition. That during the offensive last year, Zaluzhny's offensive as well, for the people that really love Zaluzhny, that a lot of resources were expended. So now there is a lack of these resources, and this is for us, the Europeans and the Americans, to make sure that Ukraine gets additional resources. But the main point that I want to kind of slowly end towards it is that we need more support for Ukraine, and more support for Ukraine is coming. The immobilized Russian assets are sending in the first 1.5 billion aid to Ukraine, which is great. We will see more and more support from the countries over the coming years as their production output grows. But I think the biggest news that we need to finish off with is that Russia is not doing great. What we talked about, that Russia having certain limited success on the front line, and that certain limited success comes with the problems in the military, it comes with the problems in the resources, it comes with the problems with ammunition and weapon stockpiles. But what we don't talk about is that the same progress that they're making also comes in a pain with their economy. Increasing endlessly your military budget and basically transitioning the economy to military rails is not an unpainful process. Russia has raised their bank rate from 16 to 18%, and it would be relatively regular situation, because Russia was stating that they want to control the inflation, but they still can't, if not for the comments of the central bank, because what she was stating, to be honest, might be even considered to be like a treason to a country, especially in the Russian society, because her comments were, and I'm just gonna put like certain quotes, is she was stating that the Russian economy is exhausted, that production growth is the weakest that we've ever seen, that the available resources of the Russian economy has reached their end, that raising the bar from 18 to past 18% will not deliver anything unless the budget stops being focused on the military purposes. She's stating that the Russian economy is hitting the floor, and what is expected for the Russian economy without any changes, well, essentially, she was saying anything except for the words unless the war is stopped and we go back to the normalization, is she saying that the economy is expecting stagflation and deep recession. The most important problem that she mentioned, and this is where I want to underscore, is the deficit of qualified workforce. When we're talking about Russia having manpower, people look at the number of population of Russia and stating, oh, Russia can still get a lot of man there. It's like, yes. However, there is an issue. Right now, the calculational estimates is that for every one person that Russia mobilizes into military, about 3 other people leave. And usually those 3 are from the most kind of top tier, the top qualification tier of the forces. So not only Russians are losing the manpower on the front line, they are having an insane brain and qualification drain from their economy, where the top specialists that are keeping the economy afloat are basically leaving the country. The simplest way to think about the Russian economy, the simplest way to think about this situation that Russia is in, is that Russia sacrificed, cut out the fundamentals of their economy, the fundamental of their financial structures, and they sacrificed it on the altar of pretty picture. They sacrificed this on the altar of, if we just show that our economy is doing well, so that the Western media articles are stating, hey, look, Russian economy is doing well, growing steadily, then no one will kind of notice that we are basically cutting out our vital organs that are necessary for the economy to function at all. The problem is that if it's not a short term, if it's not a quick and dirty victory where the favorable president, I wonder who might that be, is elected in the United States and then sanctions are starting to be lifted from Russia. If it's not a panic amongst the Europeans stating, oh my God, Russia is unbeatable, we must give up support for Ukraine. If it's not that, then if this war goes for a longer time, then suddenly the fact that you have cut out a part of your economic liver is now suddenly, despite you still being alive, is becoming a big problem for you to operate. And this is already happening. We already talked about the Russian production slowing down this year compared to what they got before. A lot of it was just because the production was based around getting stuff from the longer stockpiles and then quickly refurbishing and getting into the front line. The fact that right now T-62 is considered one of the two main battle tanks for Russia, like, I want you to stop and think about this. The latest tank that was expected at the 2022 that Russia will put to this war was T-72. It was revised in 2023 that most likely we will see some T-62s that Russia still have stored. Now, Russia is not only fully dependent on T-62s, a fucking ancient tank, and like, I'm using tanks as an example, this is for everything, but also it's pulling the T-55s, T-54s from the storage facilities. The Second World War, they were designed and delivered during the end of the Second World War era tanks. They are now also using them for the assaults. They're using motorcycles for the assaults. This is not because they are doing well. This is the accumulation of problems. We know Ukraine is doing bad. We know that there are issues within Ukrainian military, within Ukrainian society, within Ukrainian defense positions, and the lack of resources. We know all of that. That does not mean that Russia is doing well. Their production is dropping. The weapons production is not dropping. The growth is flattering. It's lower than even expected by the propaganda Russian numbers. This is when Russian liver cutout is finally kicking in. Additionally, the OPEC Plus, the cartel that Russia is in, is very, very unhappy, and there has been a lot of negotiations. Russia basically said that the prices should not be dropped for oil. They want to preserve their gains for the Russian budget as much as possible. The problem for Russia is that Russia, Iraq, and Kazakhstan has been dipping their toes very, very heavily in overproducing the oils that they're promised to their cartel buddies. And their cartel buddies are not very happy about it. So we are expecting that despite Russian efforts on trying to hold down the lowering of their price, it's expected that OPEC Plus will start lowering the prices for oil. So if we see prices for oil drop, Russia again gonna start having a lot of pain. Additionally, Chinese banks not really keen to work with Russia. We talk a lot about the Biden administration not delivering all of the weapons to Ukraine, not allowing to strike Russia, not doing everything, but they're doing a lot of other things. For example, the economic pressure that they're extorting on their third-party allies for Russia, yeah, it's doing pretty well. Russia is struggling with China, and they're now withdrawing payments and withholding payments in yuan. So Russia, it's going to be at the end of August, at the start of September, when we're going to find out for sure if Chinese banks will be able to find a way to work with Russia. But if Russia will not be able to now use yuan as their kind of major trading currency, then Russia will have huge overhead for a lot of their economic activity. What I'm getting at is that while we see this, and we see Russia moving forward, and we see them growing up, and it's painful for me as much as you seeing this. This comes at tremendous cost. Russia is giving up on any potential future that they will have just to get here. So unless we break, unless we suddenly stop electing leaders that will not represent us but would rather represent Russia, Ukraine will win. It's an awful strategy. I talked about this being very brutal strategy against Ukrainians because this is paid by the blood of Ukrainians, and it breaks my heart to talk about it. But it is working. Russia is feeling the pain, and as the time goes by, there's going to be more and more pain. The resources will come to an end, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse for Russia. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it despite it being extremely long, but I just wanted to let it all out because I have so much more to talk about. And I want to do more content, maybe a little bit shorter format, up to 10 to 15 minute max. And I want to start maybe releasing videos once every day, or as much as I can every day. The issue with that is my medical condition. If you don't know, during my vacation that was just recently, I got an ear trauma and I've lost all my hearing pretty much on my left side. While I'm taking medication already from the accident, it's not seeming to deliver any result for now. Potentially there is a chance for recovery, but I will be able to find out only later about this. In any case, thanks again. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.